Hello there, boys and girls, Marshall here. Today I've got a 1v1 for you between Dreadnought and Nik. Uber players, or star players if you prefer to call it that. I'm just going to go by Uber because that's how I kind of grew up. Anyway, we're playing on Rotunda. Dreadnought in white on the north with his customary Tokamak Commander going bots into air, decided against his previous queue. Bots air vehicles, number of power into more vehicles, more bots, more air later on. And you'll notice as he's building these things, he's putting up power generators to support his factories. So for those of you who are sort of gradually finding your feet in this game, that's kind of what you do. You have to power a particular factory with like 2 or 3 P-gens depending on how heavy you're going to go. But here we go with Dreadnought coming out with 2 Fabs, then a Boombot times 2 and a Firefly Scout. Boombots will be there to try and snipe some fabricators from Nik, and we'll go and see him in a second. Next we're coming up with more units. So not many Fabs from Dreadnought, which is unusual. Typically you tend to get around 3 Fabs to start with. Let's have a look. Down here with Nik, as I said, 3 Fabs. There you go. Being less of an aggressive start from Nik. No Boombots here. He's just playing it safe, defending his Fabs. He's seen the Boombots on their way, so he's going to move the docks in front of the Fabs and probably spread them out just a little bit, just in case. In comes the Firefly, taken out by Nik. There we go. Oh, oh! Nik's docks! Nik's docks! Fortunately, Dread's Boombots are going around the other side of the rocks here, but interesting from Nik not to keep those with his Fabs. I guess maybe he thought that he wouldn't have to do that. But as we've got the... Oh, here they come. I'll take out a couple of mechs, maybe one. There we go. 1 mech's gone. Oh yes, it's okay. And a 4th Fab out. So let's have a look around the map, because you can see the builds as they come out from the players now. But let's have a look around the map. So you've got a fair amount of mechs in your spawn. You've got a nice 2 expansion here between some rocks. And the other side of the rocks, you've got some 3 expansions. So they're not right next to your base, but they're also reasonably defensible because of the choke points at either end to get in. What you'll next tend to do, if you look at the map as a whole, you've got kind of 2 alleyways, if you will, to your opponent. You've got this one, which has very spread out mechs, but quite a lot of it, actually, on this side. Nik coming in here to kill off a Fab will probably do so. Dread reacts in time, but not quick enough. Down it goes. A nice win there for Nik. But anyway, yes, as I was saying, there's lots of mechs, but it's actually quite spread out. So it's not really an area that you can lock down easily. It's more sort of a contest over time, if you will. The areas that you tend to lock down are down the sides here, where they're slightly more clustered, and then round here as well to the east of this rotunda, if you will. You've got 4 there close together, you've got another 2 clumps of 4. And then just over a bridge you reach the other side of the map, which is much more choky, much more defensible, and has arguably less mechs, but at the same time it's much easier to expand to and generally safer because of the nature of that mechs. But don't be fooled, because we have the lava here, so not only will you be defending these alleyways along the sides, but you'll also want to watch out for that lava in the middle. It's generally how you want to be looking at a map, is where these players are going to expand to first as you're playing. Where do I want to expand to first? Where am I going to expand to next? And once you've worked that out, you can then send some units to your opponent's expansion. Let's have a look here. Is Nik duking Sparks? Almost managed it, but Dread did lose his air in the process. So not bad news for Nik. Only a couple of docks. He saw an expansion there. He reset Dread's air, if you will. Dread, though, going very heavy strikers. Unusual in the current meta. Unless it's coming back in and I'm just not aware of it. Which is also quite possible. But Nik here setting up a forward factory. That's all you can really do in this area, is to kind of claim territory. A factory really helps cement an area down because it produces those units further forward, especially considering it's a vehicle factory, so those slower units in general will now be spawning further forward. Here we go, regrouping his units there again. Whoops. Don't know what's going on there. Strikers and Sparks will beat Strikers out any day. You got any T2 coming? Nik starting on a T2 vehicles, thinking better of it by the looks of things. Thinks I'd rather get out onto the front lines. Nik very heavy floating his mechs and power right now. He could really be building a few more factories, really. Hence the move to T2. Decides to go for T2 bots instead of vehicles. I wonder why. Of course, the bots have the Slammer. They have the Locust that can go across lava. That could be a potential reason. Sniper bots, of course. A much larger area that they can shoot. Their range. And then, of course, you have the Blue Hawks that are pretty good against single target vehicles. And not to mention the Colonels, which seems to have been popularized by the Frenchman Marshal Grizzly in his recent ranked games. If you ever watch his stream, you'll know that this is not how he sounds. But that's what a Brit sounds like when they're doing a French accent, so get over it. Meanwhile, drifters from Dreadnought now. Using that lava that I mentioned before, seeing a few of these openings, popping in. Nik responding with his own drifters. Again, that's why you have the factories there to protect, rather than necessarily investing in loads and loads of point defense. They have their place, but you know, sometimes more factories when you're floating is the better call. Almost there with T2 bots. Dreadnought yet to go for T2. Nik starting to stream in with some units around the back, though. Not good news for him. Dread falling behind a little bit on the eco now. 20 mechs behind. Much greater power, though. Not as big of an army. And the more fabbers he loses here on his expansion, the slower he will be expanding on this side, and the more damage Nik can potentially do if he keeps up his attack on this side. And that's potentially what he will be doing. He's got some fabs over here. He'll be building more factories on this side, I would imagine. And he'll be locking down these choke points as well, to boot. So Dread will need to push out in some way, shape or form. He's making some head roads on the other side of the map here. Managed to take out one of Nik's factories there and pushing him back out of the centre of the rotunda. And even raided some of his expansion towards the west. Good news for Dread. Nice wins there. Nik almost up to T2, not quite there yet. And Dread with the drifters ready to come across the lava when there are enough numbers. But of course they will need anti-air support, and Nik has the bombers. Dread has not got the air support. His air fab about to pop off, but the radar goes up anyway. But yes, he'll need that air support, and he hasn't got it right now. Let's have a look on the other side of the map here. Nik continuing to harass. Damaging Dread's expansions there. Forcing him to respond. Dread down now to 7 Fabricators. This is also a good move here from Nik. It kind of cements this join between the areas. So now Nik kind of owns this and makes it a lot easier for him to move between the two sides, if he so decides to do so. Of course, he has to actually get this up first before Dread moves in with his drifters, which he might well do so. Yep, Fab's in jeopardy. Fab's in jeopardy. Nik responding very, very quickly there. Or was that just... I think that was just a build queue, to be honest with you. Let's not give Nik too much credit. But he probably would have been able to respond to that anyway, so it's not too much of an issue. Looking at the ecos though, Dread has managed to knock Nik down a peg or two. Look at that. Nik was, well, up in the 200s. He was knocked down a bit, and now Dread is actually caught up to Nik in that side of things, which, you know, is pretty valuable for him. It means that whatever he's been doing on the Rotunda side has been working. Nik's forced to send his commander out to respond. He's got his T2 up and ready. Slammer's coming out to really help against the T1 vehicle spam, which Dread seems to be favouring in this game, so they're the ideal unit to deal with this. Dread, of course, still yet to go for T2. Nik comes in with some locusts. That's not good news for Dread. Nom 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 nom. Not too much value out of those, but as long as Dread is aware of them, then he's going to have to deal with them somehow. Commander a little bit offside here. Dread up in the eco game, as I mentioned. His army is greater as well, but Nik has the T2 to trade off that offset. This push here could potentially be very, very damaging, but the bombers are there. The Icarus come in as well. Good use of Icarus here. I think because we've got T2 units in play, they're not going to be doing a huge amount of damage, but it's better than nothing. And it gives Dread that little bit of extra power. Of course, Nik comes in with his air and resets everything. How many air factories aside have we got now for Dread? We have just the two of us. And Nik, we've got 1, 2 also. Interesting. So no one's really playing for control of the air here. It's more just a sort of support role at this point. Nik, though, still with the locusts. Nom 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 nom. Good work from him there, knocking Dread back down into below 200. Problem is, Dread has this attacking force round the back here. Platoon, if you will. Could threaten these 3 mechs if he kept them on the move, but I think Nik might just about be able to intercept this now with these slammers here. Indeed he will. But Dread keeping Nik contained. Exactly what he wants to do. But this forward line from Dread here is actually really powerful. Nik's tried to whittle it down. He's taken out a factory, but just getting pelters to lock it down here. So all he's going to have to do... And that's actually a really good central position for those pelters. Look at that. It goes all the way up to the edge of the rocks on both sides. That is a very, very important forward position there. If you hadn't noticed that before, take note now. That means that Nik can't really get around the sides, unless of course Dread doesn't have the sight on them. And funnily enough, Dread doesn't have radar in this forward base, so it relies on him having vision of those other things, of those units that are going around. But Nik here, with that forward radar, Nik does not have the power to be able to support it though, which is why we're not seeing the range. It needs a bit more power. Got a few too many factories up and running right now. He's got a T2 fab building 2-2 mechs. That will also be draining his power there. Army counts though, big time favouring Dreadnought here. It's interesting because the factory count is actually favouring Nik. As is the fab account, but the eco is favouring Dread, so it must just be a case that Dread has been stalling for less time than Nik has, allowing him to get a bigger army faster. And of course, Dread hasn't gone, well, he's only just about starting to mix T2 into his composition there. We've got a few slammers and gillies there, heading directly towards a commander, no less, because of course he has been able to see where this commander was with a few drifters that were out and about. Nik now having to run his commander for the hills. Will he be able to intercept this force and actually take it down? It's going to be interesting here. We've got some grenadiers taking pot shots over the mountains. Nik microing his forces a little bit there to try and get the best out of his grenadiers. Splitting his forces up a little bit. The commander's still running. He knows he has to run, otherwise he will be doomed. Here. A few more T2 units left in there. Nik keeping the grenadiers back. Taking out the slammers there. Focusing them down. Really good job in the army micro there. Focus down Dreadnought slammers with those grenadiers. And now this army here is much less threatening to this commander. Of course, the commander is still weakened and is still vulnerable to such an attack, but not to the same degree as instant loss would have been had he not intercepted it in that way. But now, though, of course, as I mentioned before, Dread, with the larger army counts, is just ready with another one on this side. Nik can try and raid, but I think he's a little too far behind now, because Dread's armies are at the choke points where they need to be. And Nik just can't quite get in. He can't quite get into raid. And that's the problem. The only way into raid is with locusts around the back. And he's not doing it. Because he needs all of his production on things that fight. And locusts generally aren't ones for big army engagements because they just pop. Really. And it's a real trouble. Dread just has a lot of map control here. Now going for T2 air as well. When that comes out, Nik really won't be able to respond because Nik hasn't invested in any more air factories. He's just investing so heavily in drifters right now that he feels like that's going to be the way the game goes, but he's got to get back into the air game in order to contest Dread here. Who continues to push in on the front lines again. Nik's fabs at risk. Down they go. Very heavy grenadier play. And of course, part of the reason why we're seeing such heavy grenadier play is because of things like these rock formations. They are so numerous on this map that a good army position is really key. Good pot shots off from the shellers there. But let's have a look at how Nik is progressing on this side of the map there. He did have quite a sizable army. Like he sort of mixed it all in here, thinking about where best to push. Again, Dread's locked this area down with a couple of turrets and a pelter. If Nik can get vision on that, he's got a ghillie in there, some grenadiers. But he's going to have to lose a few units to take this down. Not ideal for him. And we go there. Elter gets her shots off. Wasn't into the middle of the group. Nik there. Potential damage incoming from Nik now. The armies have been equalised, interestingly enough. The factory counts are equal as well. Dreadnought has a much greater eco, but is running out of it. Coming out with the T2 air now. Phoenix and Kestrel gunships. Nik is going to see that T2 air at some point. Does he actually see it? That's crucial. He doesn't see it. And now he does. Now he sees the T2 air. How will he react to that? He's going to need a lot more in the way of spinners now, or hummingbirds. Probably just mix in a few more spinners. There we go. Straight into spinner reaction. Of course, if you go control and then click on your factories, if you've got a big queue set up, whatever you control clicked is put to the front of your queue. There we go. So that army from Nik has actually done quite good work there. It's taken out a lot of mechs, it's taken out a lot of factory infrastructure, and it's knocked out Dread's hold of this choke point. So this is a potential route for Nik to press in here. Dread, though, has to make use of his air advantage here. He's building up his Kestrel army, and with that Kestrel force, he'll be able to go around and knock out all of these single mechs that Nik just can't defend with his air force, and doesn't have the static or the standing army to be able to defend. So that's what the Kestrels need to do, is they need to find these weak mechs and knock them down, and then Nik will be in a world of problems with the lack of eco that he would then have. Here we go. Watch how quickly they deal with these mechs. Oh, 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 there we go. Right over, and move on. And Nik just can't react to this. He can't respond. He doesn't have the units and the forces. And as he reacts to this, look, no spinners in this army. So the Kestrels can just let rip. I mean, there's a spinners over the side, but not in the middle of it. They could just do a one pass and do a little bit of picking away, picking about damage. There you go, look at all that. And back to regroup and regain numbers. Nik not overextending with his armies, he doesn't want to push out too far. Dread, though, because he knows that Nik can't push out too far, he's expanding willy-nilly. Got all these extra fabs coming in now. To pick up all of this loose mechs. Nik having a look around. A little spy, sees what's going on. Sees a big old army coming his way. And he sees all the air over that way. There you go. So we've got a few Galata, but it's just not enough to dissuade that many gunships now. Oh no! And again, the lack of spinners in this army. That is a major, major problem. Look at Nik's army count as it just drops and drops and drops and continues dropping. That was painful. That was a quarter of his entire army value just wiped out. Has got a few locusts wandering around trying to do a little bit of damage, but is it too little too late? This is almost a sort of an all-in push here because he has to defend on this side while simultaneously doing enough damage to Dread and maybe sniping a commander on this side. But it wouldn't be a snipe because, well, it's not really what you'd refer to as a snipe in this instance, but Dread there realizing, actually, I'm not going to push into this. I'm going to keep the threat of my army floating around a bit, rather than lose it. I'm not going to push in right now. I'm just going to go back and regroup. Nik on the other side, though. Army comes in, takes out some T2 mechs. This is a nice move for Nik here, a nice win. He's got a number of spinners. He needs to keep them safe, though. Actually, they're getting picked off by this slammer at the back. The spinners coming in. 3 left. And they're gone. And now the gunships have free reign. Nik is able to take down a few mechs, though. Not a huge amount of damage, though, because look, Dreadnought is still on 300 plus. That's 100 mechs more than Nik at this point. Nik just needs the air investment, but he can't move all the way over to it because he just doesn't have the economy to be able to invest so heavily in new air factories. And that's the thing, Dread is only in this by a T2 air factory in terms of the air game. That's the only reason he's winning the air game, and Nik resigns. He just didn't have the flexibility in his economy to be able to respond to what Dreadnought was throwing at him. What a game. Dreadnought there, claiming land. Raiding where he could, using the lava advantage opportunity with the drifters. Locking down choke points. Adjusting to exploit opponents' weaknesses and cementing his economy lead. Well, hope you enjoyed this, folks. Hope you learned a few things from it as well. As always, don't forget to like the video if you have enjoyed it. Really helps me out, helps the channel grow. And of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button there. But also, I do some streaming on my Twitch at the moment. I'm going playing through the Halo series. I've never played that before, so if you fancy joining in some of that fun there, my Twitch is linked in the description. You'll be more than welcome over there. Anyway, I'm Marshall, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this video. And as always, have a good one.